Are you a leader in customer success, pre-sales, professional services, support? Do you work behind the scenes and roll up your sleeves to make sure that customers are happy? Renew? Then this is for you. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Getting it done. Services, success, and software. We'll talk with the pros that have been in the trenches, getting service teams off the ground, launching new types of groups to service customers, or running agencies that don't have a product attached to it. For the pros, by the pros. This is the GSD Podcast, and this is your host, Jeff Kushmerek.
Welcome back to the podcast, here with Michael Burton, and we are here at long last. We're finally going to talk about services again now. For people, like a 35 episode gap from professional services. There's a lost episode too that I have to release that I found on my hard drive when I switched over from my new computer. But well, I don't know if we talked about this, but when I started the podcast, the S was to always change. Could be getting software done, could be getting services done, could be getting success done, could also be getting shit done, which is the play on everything. And probably over-indexed on customer success over the last year or so. But today I would love to get back in and start talking about professional services. So give everybody the quick 5-minute and then we'll dive into some of the things we talked about.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the time. I think it's also good for me because I'm doing this all over again. So I was
that's a good point.
a services business before in the Salesforce space, specifically focused on helping marketers. Had a great exit back in 2020. Yeah. And then I'm with Stitch now. So I'm Michael Burton, the CEO of Stitch and co-founder. And Stitch is a consultancy that's focused on helping marketers kind of get the most out of, and in this case, we're kind of focusing on a couple of different SaaS-based companies between Twilio and a company called Braze. Yeah. But it's all with this angle of kind of what's happening with marketers. So that's what we're doing. We officially launched back in September, and we're kind of applying all the lessons learned from our prior life and figuring out how do we go do it even better, which is there's so much going on in this circles right now in professional services and consultancies and the effectiveness of internal services teams inside of SaaS companies. So it's an exciting time. Looking forward to talking about it with you.
No, I'm looking forward. We're going to dive right into it. After I forgot to compliment you on your shirts, which I think we showed up on the first time we chatted with corresponding shirts. So I'm like, I am not going in that direction today. Very important. But I think I told the story. The reason why I bought the shirt was because my shoulder, I had it in a sling and I couldn't unbutton anything. So I got a bunch of shirts where I could just like pull off and go from there. Luckily, the shoulder is somewhat better.
So good.
So, I've seen a dramatic change about the word professional services in SaaS startups recently. When I came up, granted old, and I've been through a new term I heard, the 3 wars. I heard from a podcast called This Week in Startups, a bunch of venture capitalists have been through the 3 wars, or basically the 3 busts, essentially, of the 2000.com combined with 9/11, and then you had 2008, and then you have consider this like a little bit of a market shift, right? But like every time I've gone through these wars, I've seen this tightening up on professional services aspects, where every time you bring it up, the exec teams and the boards are like, we don't want to talk about services. Services will ruin our margins. It's going to make us look like we're a services company versus a software company. And I was wondering, do you bump into that coming from your angle? Does it create more more opportunities as a partner to be able to come in and work with startups that don't want a services team?
I do. I think that what's happening is that it's not just about the margin. I mean, margin, sure, like a consultancy. My background, I think we talked before. My background had been in internal services
Right.
as far as for tech companies for most of my career, and it's only been in the last 7 years kind of getting out, understanding what's like in a consultancy. But
Which
just
I always
very,
have called
yeah,
real services.
it is true. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a whole different world, and
that's
because to your point, like you are focused on, you got to be high value, high margin, strong co-sellers, and it is a tight ship you have to run to be successful in a services business. So if you're a tech company, like having that kind of association is super powerful than this idea of, is it a loss leader internally, or is it closing product gaps? Like that's not a great long-term solution to have huge internal services teams. You want to have this external consultancy. So we've definitely benefited from that, from tech companies saying, hey, well, let's partner with someone like a Stitch. Like this is better for, like this is a win all the way around.
yeah.
And they're going to also kind of help those customers long term. And I do think that we're right now, there's even more emphasis on this for sure.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of social posts over the last week talking about the Salesforces of the world and how much revenue they're driving
Oh, yeah, I
versus
saw that
expense.
today. It was like
Significant.
Salesforce, Zuora, and like,
Yeah,
it's pretty significant.
it's eye-opening. And so this is, I think it's another great push for consultancies. And I think it is a benefit of a little bit of a downturn where we can step up and we're able to be an extension, and also short-term fixes for customers too, who aren't necessarily looking for a long-term investment. That opens the door for companies like Stitch.
Oh, absolutely. When I my perception is always changing on this. First of all, just for some vocabulary's sake, a lot of people have even started calling implementation professional services, and when they say professional service, they just mean like the implementation team, which is like, hey, you have 30 days, they're going to get you all hooked up and everything. I then say like, no, the professional services, there's some customization going on. There may be some like data cleansing and whatnot. There may be some, so you're saying filling in some feature gaps that haven't been built out yet. Where do you think that sort of ends in its maturity cycle, as in building up because we've talked about, we've both done time on both sides of the coin there. And there's that natural point in time where it's like, okay, we're not going to grow the services team internally anymore. Is there I don't think it's a revenue point or anything like that, some type of professional services maturity model, like you get to this certain point and it's like, we have to start relying on partners a little bit?
Yeah, I think I don't have like the perfect answer. My instincts
I don't think there is
me,
one, but it's like a feel question.
Yeah, I feel like it's, if to the point, feeling, it's probably a whole lot earlier than anyone really anticipates,
Good
right?
point.
I think like you do need it early on. I've been a part of startups, like product startups, where we recognize the importance of services immediately to help with those early wins and build up. But it shouldn't be too long before you're thinking about, how do I start this partner ecosystem, for all the reasons we just talked about, like all the advantages that you're getting. And an interesting point I don't think we talked about before is that the primary investor that's kind of supporting my Stitch business is a company called High Alpha. They're studio capital. They have a capital arm, but they have only done B2B SaaS. So Stitch was the very first time they were in the services space.
Oh, interesting.
And it was not something I'd approached them about. We just kind of said, hey, this should work. And I was asking them why. Like, why are you thinking about that as you're starting up these product companies? And it's because they're realizing that these early stage companies do need to have more services at the very beginning, because they're seeing the consequences of not having that, which is you're losing the churn on these new customers you're striving for, are turning over really quickly. And you do need that services also to kind of cover product gaps, whether they're complementary solutions or just kind of being, consultants, right? And so it's kind of funny that's in our background.
Yeah. Do you know, just triggered something off here. Do you think it's maybe more to the shift that there's a lot more like headless and API driven tools that are out there? Are you seeing it with straight up product companies as well too?
Uh, Both.
Okay.
So it's not just hey, what's the overall strategy on what this looks like for a headless technology, but any kind of just product company, there's more and more of an emphasis to it's not a huge army of people when you're a startup, but
Yeah.
you're investing more of that time in people that are true consultants. And I think I've heard you talk about this before. You got to be careful between customer success and the consultants. Like if there's too much mixing there, it's not as effective as a
Right.
solution. But like truly having people that understand how this technology can work are very beneficial in the early stage. And it's also a great feedback loop
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
product.
Nobody's going to be using the
And
product more than the services team. Like
yeah,
nobody. They're
yeah,
all day, every day, hammering away at it. They've got the best feature requests. They're like, hey, can you extend the API out to do X? And yeah,
yeah.
like
Mm.
maybe put a little regex thing in there so I can collect some data. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, they're the power users. I am just now under this feeling of like the common thing I've always said is in the beginning, services teams are brought in. They're like, just get customers live. That's all we care about. I don't care if you lose money. Year or two later, it's like, okay, maybe just not lose the money. So, right. And then what I was used to was like, okay, we're a little short this quarter. Actually, we need your revenue projections. And then I was going, when we were going public at Brightcove, it was like, oh my God, I've got revenue projections like on the street. But so 4 stages, which is scary. So, and so, but in that first stage that I was talking about, if you're saying you're going to lose money, you might as well do it because you might as well just get that time to live, time to value faster, right? So
For
yeah,
sure. Yeah, I think, and that definitely accelerates it with that investment in like true services for sure. So it's kind of, it's for me as someone who's partial to professional services,
yeah, yeah.
it is exciting to see that it's benefiting a lot of ways. You're seeing it show up in more startups. You're seeing it now as like these independent consultancies who are having a lot of success and
Yeah.
supporting these technology companies that are out there.
So let's do this. I don't want to lead it. I certainly have my own model, but I want to see what yours is. I'll start it off, right? Services team gets brought in. Where I've usually seen this and where I actually, this was my model for 3 different companies, which was like, not really wanting to hire any more people. I'm unsure if we're gonna have the volume. Who knows if we can rely on sales projections, right? But if they do come in, I might need an extra 4 or 5 people, right? So I would reach out and I'd find a services company and get them all teed up and say like, here's a point solution. Can you deliver on this point solution? And I viewed that as sort of like stage 1, right? How does that grow? How does that relationship grow afterwards? Like what do you see that sort of okay, yeah, you come in, you're doing some, adjunct, almost like backfill type of work and then moving on from there.
So it's always been my preference. My personal preference is not to do that.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it. There's just different ways you can approach it. Now, my personal preference has been, I want to go in stage 1 as a co-seller. So,
and I just want to say, this is what I was finding out in the last 2 weeks. This is like a new model that's being talked about, which is amazing. So let's dive into this a little bit. Yeah.
and some of this is because I just didn't know any better. Like I just started in the prior company. This was just how we started moving and saw good success. But my first exposure to outside consultants when I was at Salesforce, and we were using other subcontracting partners. So that exact example, we
Yeah,
would come
that's a good
in.
point. There's
Sure.
subcontractors. Yeah, it's essentially like instead of you finding 3 Java developers, you went to a company and got 3 Java developers. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would have 4 or 5 of these consultancies. And it was one of the reasons why I thought, well, I can go do this. Like I can go out there.
Yeah.
And then my model was not to be dependent on the subcontracting. I thought I would be more valuable as a co-seller. So working on the very front to add value, to help, deliver on what pain can I mitigate from the seller my tech partner, which is how do I mitigate the risk? How do I help them close a deal faster? How do I bring vertical kind of industry expertise to that conversation and then see it from beginning to end? And that's my preferred approach. It's what we're doing at Stitch all over again, is leading with that co-sell, be a true partner, and get very sticky with the go-to-market teams. And I think I like that. Now it takes a lot of work. I mean, it's constantly
I want to
outreach.
jump on something that you said before it fades out from my memory here, which is the vertical expertise. And I have had some customers where they ask us to bring in, and they're like, how come, the salespeople are relying on the partners so much and everything? I don't know if everybody's realized this, but sometimes you don't know jack about the vertical that you're selling your software into. You just so in Deca, we made the best search and browse software for commerce out there, right? But we didn't know shit about commerce. You're like, what should we do for our strategy for merchandising? I'm like, I'm a merchandising expert. I don't know. So, and so that's what we heard with some of these companies is that it's this co-selling where they're going to call up a partner, classic ones in manufacturing, we sell maybe we sell a PIM and, the manufacturing people love it. And, but our services team is only just going to be able to tell you how to configure it better. Whereas you can bring in a company that's done nothing but manufacturing for the last 20 years, and it's a solution sale, which will get a lot stickier. Yeah.
That's a huge benefit that the consultants kind of bring to the technology partner, is that solution selling. They should be the best of the best at selling a solution. And so you're not just jumping into demo and product. It's all about, you think about us as buyers of software, we just want to solve a problem. I don't need I don't need an RFP. I don't need 3 rounds of no, this is what I need a CRM. I'm this size of company. Can you help me or not? That's it.
Yeah.
And so I think these consultants that we, as professional services get really strong at that and bring that strong vertical expertise. And if it's a CMO who's in a huge consumer bank, hey, you can tell stories there. It's very, very powerful. And you're spot on about just because you are selling financial services or health and life sciences does not mean you're a 20-year expert inside that tech company. Yeah. It's normally not the case.
I got this 24-year-old. He's great. He knows the admin panel in and out. You talked about something when we first got together and we're chatting, and I don't say it blew my mind, but I was like, let's talk more about this. And it was the partner helping to reduce churn and doing upsell as well too. So just talk to me like a 5-year-old on this one, because this is new for a lot of people. Me too.
So if I'm selling alongside, so Braze is one of our partners, a marketing tech platform, more of a modern marketing tech platform. If I'm selling alongside that account executive and bringing some experience on a streaming service, we happen to have a lot of streaming service experience. Right, we're going to help develop that relationship and then close and help that customer go implement and then be available for ongoing services. When you develop that kind of relationship, you are in the best position possible. There's no one else that is as close to that customer than what you are in their business. So you have the potential not only to upsell for your own business for Stitch, but also for your partner Braze as you're finding new opportunities and new channels. And therefore that's going to reduce churn. And I think that's some of the criticism of some of the focus on internal services and these product companies is because there's just so much emphasis on launch. All right, yes, initial time to value is super important, but you're doing that at a loss, financial loss, and then you're out of the picture in a lot of cases. So who is going to go do that? And the groups that are most incented to do that is the partner, and the consultancy is able to go do that. So you've got happy customers. We're winning for ourselves. We're winning for the Brazes of the world, and we're reducing that churn. And that's where the magic happens, and you're focusing a lot of customer success there.
And who are you interacting with on the renewal and thing? Are you working with the original account exec? Are you working with the CS team at all on that?
So it depends on, every organization's a little different on how they incent the account executives. So, many of them are not incented on the renewal. So then you've got the renewals team. They are incented on upsells. So we find ourselves always in an interesting position, because we are a bit of the glue between renewals, customer success, and the account executives, which I love. Like, I want to be that point that's bringing all these different groups together. And when you do it really well, that's where the tech partners sees just a ton of value. Like, all right, yes, you helped us with a net new logo, we're hitting ACV targets, that's awesome. But when we're growing that customer over time and keeping that renewals, customer success team, and the AEs functioning and finding new opportunities, that's the beauty.
Yeah.
I think of the long-term connections that you have with a partner and your end customer. That's the cool stuff.
Yeah. I agree. It's all about setting the proper structures in place and letting everybody know their role. Because I've heard CS people like, "Oh, we've lost total control of the relationship because the partner's in there and they just want to keep their billable hours going," and things like that. So
and that for sure happens.
Yeah.
And there are different incentives, but when you're performing, when you're hitting these ACV targets and you're driving that, I mean, that helps a lot of things. I also do think there's always these different paths you can go down as a consultancy, as far as am I going to go deep on a couple of different partners? And there are some that maybe have 20 some technology partners. And I think that is where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
If you're representing competing products and then your customer success is in there, then I think then they have a right to feel antsy about it, because that does happen.
Oh, I hear. I have that with my own business. I've tried to be platform agnostic, and everybody's like, "Ah, come on, like you must be a little." And I'm like, "I really like onboarding software as an example." I'm like, there's probably 6 companies out there that I'm aware of that really do what I think should be done, and I really only have experience with 3 of them, and one is totally like a HubSpot thing. So I'm like, if you're not HubSpot, go try out these other 2, and like they're both good. They're both going to do the job. It's what works for you best. But I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to get in the middle, because you want good relationships with all these people, but yet I don't want to seem like, oh, he's just saying that because he wants the referral fee or something like that, right? So don't get me wrong, I don't like the referral fees, but I was doing some planning with one of my customers, and they decided, and this is based on some board conversations, that instead of growing a larger sales team, they are going to grow their partner network and basically split revenue 50-50 between the partner and the VP of partnerships and the VP of sales. And there you go. Everybody's got quotas and they're after it. Have you seen that before, where it's like, before I've always seen it as like hey, we can't sell to Coke, so we're going to just spin up like a partner strategy, and Accenture will sell to Coke or something like that. Sorry if you're trying to sell to Coke. And so it becomes this like, oh, it would be good if we got some more revenue from partners, and they're talking to people and they're going to recommend us and things like that. This is different, and I was curious if you've seen this and what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, to your point about like where it's not these one-offs, or the tech company maybe doesn't have coverage in Singapore, right? And then they have that, which is totally different scenario.
Yeah.
Have to go do this. But I have, and I've actually, from the original idea about truly growing your partnership team to drive sales and be a counterpart to sales, for sure I've seen that. I've benefited from that. And I think, I love that model. That's a much better way to scale when you have a strong partnership team that understands how do you not only go develop the partnerships you have and amplify their success, but become really good at finding the next 20 to 30 partners that are there to step up. Because if you do it well, you're likely going to create a problem for yourself, because those successful consultancies will get acquired, and then you have to be able to have a pool to go continue to go build out from your partner pool. But I love that. I mean, I'm not super objective when it comes to that. I recognize that. But
more money. What do I think about that? Yeah, exactly.
But if I'm the software company, I'm like, yeah, why would you not want to do that? Because you're getting all the benefits from that you're getting from the partner. They're deeper into the business. They likely, I always tell people this, and because this is true. When I left Salesforce, I actually worked more closely, more broadly with Salesforce than when I did when I was in it. And I think that, that's really the power of what partners can bring to the table. So
that's what I hear from the salespeople when I ask them why they're working with these partners. They just feel like they're making tighter bonds and stuff moving forward. Now, I wanted to bring up this concept, might be a non sequitur, but it's stuck in my head, and it goes along with this co-selling and everything. But when I was in your shoes and I did about 4 or 5 years at a tell us what to build and we'll go build it type of company. And all these, because we built some really cool stuff and had amazing architects and developers, we would have these local tech companies come to us, and they're like, similar problem, like, hey, we need other people to help us deliver. We're like, oh, okay, well, how much work? Can we guarantee 2 or 3 people getting 40 hours a week, and we'll start building a little practice around this? And they're like, oh, sure. And we're like, oh, great. That sounds great. Everybody wins. And they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, you have a quota as well. And we're like, I thought you were having a delivery problem, not a sales problem. Like, what did I do? Like,
that quickly changed on me.
Mask comes off. Like, oh my God. Like, what? Like thoughts on that? Has it happened to you? Has that happened to you?
I think I see it happening in more inexperienced partner ecosystems, like where they don't fully understand like what is partnership works, how it looks like, and they're expecting you're going to drive X amount of sourced leads, which I always thought was funny when especially the very large SaaS companies, when they have source lead targets, because these are multi-billion-dollar companies. How can me as a consultancy of 50 people think that we're somehow going to be able to drive more?
No, I know, because
you're
I will say one of those companies that I'm complaining about, not going to say them by name, but maybe they were in international business at the time.
So that's.
I'm like, we're going to make an impact to you. Really?
But so it's just not aware. But it's refreshing. When I was in New York this week and was talking about this partner, this relationship that we have, and it was this realization that what's most important to them is that we are co-selling, we're influencing, like we're helping, and then we're doing great delivery work. That's the priority. If we happen to be able to bring in some source opportunities, which would most likely come from upselling, and once we're in a customer, they're like, that's awesome. But it wasn't like, here you go, this is the number one metric we're going to look at, because it's just not realistic in so many cases.
Like, hey, by the way, if you get this, that would be great, right? Exactly. Yeah, that's always been one that just really rubbed me the wrong way. So
same here.
Obviously, because it's been about 8 years since it happened last, and it's yet a hot topic for me. Oh man. So how do you feel about creating your own offerings and practice around some of these? Is that what you're trying to do? Like, hey, this is our Salesforce practice, this is our Twilio practice, and like that? Or is it more open than that?
I think this is Stitch is a very different play than my prior company, Lev. And so like the Lev play was very focused on Salesforce marketing. And then I think we're just in a different time where it's like not one technology is suddenly like this end all be all cure for your problems. It's more about multiple solutions that are coming together. And we happen to be in a great position to help go identify what are a couple of key things that we can bring together. So, I'm not necessarily saying I've got like multiple practices. I've just kind of identified a couple of very specific SaaS companies that can work together very, very well to solve a marketer's problem. And then that's really where we're spending a lot of our time kind of pulling together solutions around that.
Oh, so
but
you
not thinking that
identified a
that's different
problem.
practice.
Did I get this right? Because you identified a problem and a solution to that problem, then identified SaaS problems that could fix, fill in like Lego blocks to fix that problem, and then went and talked to them versus them coming to you and saying like, hey, we need some people to help out with X, Y, and Z.
Yep, that's exactly right. So we're kind of proactively kind of seeing what's out there. We know from a marketer standpoint, access to just great data, not as close to real time as possible.
Yeah.
One view of their customer is super important, and then having a modern marketing tech platform to go execute on it. So that's kind of what led us down this path of a company called Segment, which is owned by Twilio, and then Braze, another publicly traded companies that, hey, together, they're really, really powerful.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting now when we're working on pursuits, and it's all three of us. It's Stitch, Segment, and Braze that are all kind of a part of a solution. And that's definitely a different story than what I've done in the past. But I'm really enjoying this.
And who's the GC on this project?
Well, it ends up being the partner. I mean, if we're doing this right, then that's how we really want it to be. Yeah. And I think that's the magic. And so I feel that kind of trust coming from our tech partners.
Their sales team must love you,
yeah,
because you're just bringing them into stuff that you want to go sell to them, and you're including them into the solution. Yeah, that's magic days for a software company. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. This has been great because I didn't have to talk about, like, I think the last time I talked was like fixed fee versus time and materials versus make sure your SOWs have assumptions and dependencies and everything. So this is a much more strategic conversation. So I appreciate it here. What did I miss? What concepts that we could have covered today? I think we went over the ones from my notes, but I wanted to make sure nothing popped into your head or anything.
No, I think we hit all the big things we wanted to talk about.
That's great. That's awesome. So as we're going through, it's February now. This should be out in a few weeks. But what's your big winter hunker down project that like here in New England, people are going to go skiing, or this is going to be when I learn guitar or something like that? Do you have a big winter project?
We have an ongoing project that's been like the last 2-year project. So it's like a winter. It took us 2 years to build our new home, and we finally moved in. But
that's awesome.
There's still more and more things that we want to get done with it, and so that's pretty much consuming our life between our 2 young boys and our house. That is our project.
Multiple Home Depot runs in a day. I love those. Those are good.
Yeah. Yep. Like, still calling our original builder. Hey, we need some work here. I'm looking at the SOW, the assumptions. You still need to deliver to A, B, and C. I'm making sure that happens.
Well, obviously you put set milestones in there, and 15 milestones. What's going on? Exactly. Oh, that's great. Well, listen, this has been awesome. I'm gonna grab all your info and put it so that people know where to contact and find out more. Just hold on one second, and I'll wrap up here. All right.